Welcome, and it's June, and it is First Thursdays at the Marin County Law Library, and we're delighted tonight to have somebody that I think you'll find of great interest. Always timely, always significant in the work that they're doing. We're lucky to have a family consultant for the Family Caregivers Alliance. For those of you who may or may not be familiar, I recommend that you go to their website after we finish tonight and you have a little bit of chance to absorb some of what you've heard. The Family Caregivers Alliance is an organization that's been around for about 40 years, and those two key terms will guide you through what you learn tonight: family and caregiver. What our family consultant will talk to us about tonight are the many manifestations of what that means and how a caregiver can both identify themselves and identify resources. I'd like to take a moment to thank our law librarian, Lori Valla-Olson, who's with us tonight. And Lori helps and is instrumental in making this event and lawyers in the library and, in fact, all of the things that happen in the library occur every day. Our president is not here with us tonight, but Christine Kirby is this term's board president, and she is also instrumental, as is Tracy Barrett, our vice president this term. I'd like to take just a moment to let people know that we have begun a limited reopening of the law library. I again would direct you to our website to watch as this progresses and to invite all of you to be in contact with us and see the changes we've made. Tonight, we're lucky to have Amanda Hartrey with us tonight, who is a family therapist and has her own practice and also is a family consultant for the Family Caregiver Alliance. The reason we felt this was a significant topic is Marin County is a rapidly demographically aging community. We are often talking about senior housing, we are talking about senior access, we are talking about healthcare issues that face people who try and remain independent, people who are caregivers to aging spouses, or adult children with disabilities. Tonight, I'd like to give you an opportunity to listen to Amanda. Amanda will be willing to take questions as we go. And without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to her. Amanda, thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you for having me. And it's great to be with everyone. Tonight, I'd like to talk about what it means to be a caregiver and then tell you about what Family Caregiver Alliance has to offer. Since it's a small group, feel free to interrupt me at any time with questions. I love questions. So anytime you have something, if you need clarity on, I'm happy to answer. So I just want to read FCA's mission statement first, and that is to improve the quality of life for caregivers and those they care for through information, services, and advocacy. So who are caregivers? The thing about caregivers is people don't always identify as a caregiver. Oftentimes it's just the family we care for. And that can be difficult to get caregivers to see themselves other than a husband or a wife, a partner, a daughter or a son. But what we at Family Caregiver Alliance think of caregivers as unpaid individuals providing assistance to family members or friends. And this assistance can be physical, but it can also be helping with money and medication management, or taking somebody to their doctor's appointments, or doing their shopping or their home chores. And what we've been noticing is a trend and more need for support for families and family caregivers, and it continues to grow. Right now, we know that at least 53 million Americans provide care each year to other adults. 61% of those caregivers are still working. And 16 million care for someone with dementia. Those are big numbers and they continue to grow. So if you look at the care that people provide, 96% of caregivers are helping with what we call ADLs, activities of daily living, or IADLs, instrumental activities of daily living. So those are things like bathing, dressing, grooming, toileting, or things like I mentioned, money management, medication management, transportation, shopping. 46% help with medical tasks. So things like injections and oxygen, hospital beds and lifts, walkers, catheters, wound care. And unfortunately, caregivers report little training on medical nursing and nursing tasks. You can see from the trends on this chart that between 2015 and 2020, everything is increasing. So from the amount of caregivers in the US, that's increased, to those caregivers who report poor health. So we're hearing a lot more from caregivers who are in poor health themselves. We know that the more tasks a caregiver has to take on, the higher rates of depression, anxiety, and stress they have. And so many of them worry that they're not doing it right. And that can have a really big impact on the caregiver's health as well. So typically, caregiving is undertaken willingly. Your father might have a stroke, and all of a sudden you find yourself in a caregiving role, and you do it willingly. What you don't realize is how much work that actually will be when you take on that role, or how expensive it can be to try and get help. And so what we see is that family caregivers experience very high rates of depression, stress, and other mental health problems when they're not getting support. And 40 to 70% of caregivers experience symptoms of clinical depression. We know that caregivers tend to self-medicate with alcohol, prescription, and psychotropic drugs at higher rates than non-caregivers. We also know that elderly spousal caregivers who are experiencing mental or emotional strain have a 63% higher risk of dying than non-caregivers. And those caregivers, they are, sorry, I just lost my train of thought. Let me move on. We see higher use of ER visits among caregivers. We also know that older caregivers and people of low socioeconomic status and those with limited support networks report poorer psychological and physical health than caregivers who don't fall into these categories. I want to just go back. I remembered what I was going to say with the elderly spousal caregivers. We know that 5 years after they stop caring for somebody, they're still dying at higher rates than non-caregivers. And that's because of all of the stress that they've undertaken. So those cortisol stress hormones are doing such damage on internal organs. So because caregiving has stopped doesn't mean that the health impacts have stopped. We also know that caregivers report not having time or energy to go to a doctor or to prepare healthy meals or to exercise or to fill their prescriptions. So when we're talking about something like self-care, which is a really big buzzword right now, we're not even talking about things like getting a massage or going to a spa, which would be lovely. We're talking about looking at your basic health needs, going to the doctor and filling your prescriptions. It should be noted that there are also positive effects of caregiving. So it can bring a higher level of compassion and empathy and appreciation to the person you're caring for. And sometimes it can improve relationships. And we see that caregivers gaining skills feel like they're making a difference. And it can add meaning to somebody's life when they're helping somebody else. And we know that the care that people receive at home undoubtedly keep them from being placed in a facility prematurely or at all. And often it can allow people to live their final years at home. But from all of the data that we've collected over the years, we know that caregivers need support. So only 28% of spousal caregivers had help from family. And this is hard because many of these caregivers are elderly themselves and they have their own health issues. I see it all the time. I talk to a wife who's caring for her husband, and she tells me that their children have their own lives and they can't help, or the children live out of state and they just can't be there. They're wonderful to call on the phone, but that's as far as it goes. Only 12% have used respite. Again, by the time somebody ends up getting through to me, a lot of the time they're already in crisis. I hear stories that they've been caring for somebody for years and years and haven't had a meaningful break. And that can wreak havoc on somebody's mental and physical health. And 78%, that's a pretty big percentage, report needing more help and information. And unfortunately, the way our system is set up, there really isn't an easy way to navigate the system. And not many places can help guide people towards resources. So again, what I see a lot of is somebody might end up at the hospital, social worker gives them a list of resources, and they just start going down that list and start calling. But they don't even know who they're calling or why they're calling. And sometimes they hit on us, and then we can help with things specific to caregiving. But there's no one-stop shop. Even with us, we have to refer out to other places, and it can be hard to navigate the system. So we try and step in to help when we can. So Family Caregiver Alliance is considered the Bay Area Caregiver Resource Center. And we provide services to 6 counties in the Bay Area. So our counties are Alameda, Contra Costa, Marin, San Francisco, San Mateo, and Santa Clara. But there are 11 caregiver resource centers throughout the state of California, and collectively we serve every county in California. So if you needed to find a caregiver resource center in a county that we don't serve, you can go to the collective website at caregivercalifornia.org and go to find your local center, and you can find the caregiver resource center that serves the county that you reside in or the person that you care for resides in. Because we know sometimes, you know, I do have clients who they might live here, but the person they're caring for lives in another county, lives several hours away. So in order to be eligible for our services, you need to be a non-professional caregiver. And so what that means is typically you're a family member or a partner or a friend. Sometimes I've had roommates caring for somebody with an adult onset cognitive or neurological impairment. And that's important because we don't serve anybody caring for someone who's under the age of 18. And whatever diagnosis they have needed to occur 18 or older. So any of the dementias, including Alzheimer's, it can also be an undiagnosed dementia, but if you're just noticing cognitive impairment that hasn't been diagnosed, we can certainly help. Parkinson's disease, stroke, MS, ALS, traumatic brain injury, again, has to be 18 or older when it was sustained, a brain tumor, and Huntington's disease. So these are kind of the general services, and I'm going to dig a little bit deeper into what we offer. But I want to let you know that anyone can call us. You don't need a referral to give us a call. We get direct calls from caregivers. Often it's a spouse or an adult child, but again, as I mentioned, it can be other relatives, friends, neighbors. We get a lot of referrals from doctors, social workers, and other agencies as well. And as long as they fit the criteria of caring for someone with an adult onset cognitive or neurological impairment, we can help. We don't look at legal status. We don't look at financial resources. Our goal is to provide information, resources, and education to caregivers in all Bay Area counties. And it's also important to note that all of our services are free. We get our funding through state funds, through county funds, through grants, and we've been around for over 40 years. So some of the things that you'll get from us are information and referrals. So sometimes somebody will call and they really don't need a lot. They're just wondering about getting a few names of some reputable home care agencies. Or they might want to know they've hired somebody independently, and how do they figure out the payroll situation. So we can just give them some quick answers and information, or we refer them to somebody who might be able to help. A lot of times what happens is somebody will call and they have more than just one small need, and their situation is complex and they have a lot of questions. They're feeling lost. Maybe they're having a crisis and they need to talk to somebody more in depth. And that's where this one-on-one assessment of needs comes in. And that would be with a family consultant. In Marin County, I'm the family consultant, so I serve all of Marin. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about what that assessment and consultation entails. We have a lot of education, classes, workshops, webinars, and we used to have conferences pre-COVID, hope to get back to those. Our classes, all of our classes right now are online, of course, but again, we used to just go out into all the counties and do classes, so hopefully we'll get back to that. We have other supports, which I'll get into in a little bit, but we have some grants for getting a break, for getting some emotional help and some legal help, and some retreats, which I'll talk about. On our website, we have lots of publications and online resources. We have over 60 fact sheets in all different languages: Chinese, Spanish, Vietnamese, and Korean, as well as English. We have something called CareNav, which I'll talk about in a little bit. And we do a lot of public policy as well. That's not the area that I work in, but we work very hard to put policy in place to make caregivers' lives easier and better in California. We also house the National Alliance for Caregivers, and it's kind of a clearinghouse. We have a live person on the other line, and people from all different states can call in, and she can direct them to resources in their state. So when you call us, there's a couple different ways to come into Family Caregiver Alliance. One way is to call us. So when you call Family Caregiver Alliance, you'll talk to our intake coordinator, and she'll screen you to make sure that you're eligible for our services. And if so, then she's going to listen to your situation and respond to questions you might have. She might not be able to answer all of the questions, and that's okay. That's when she passes you on to a family consultant. A lot of times people call and they're already in tears before they can even start talking, and so she's also there to provide emotional support. You know, she can make referrals to community agencies and send you information if you need it. She drafts lots of emails and puts packets together and mails things out to people all the time. And then, of course, if she feels that you need more support than what she can give, she's going to refer you for a family consultation. And we offer that in multiple languages. We have a lot of language capabilities, and if we don't, then we have translation lines that we use. And we just did one for a deaf caregiver as well. So we have that covered. And let me just show you the other way that you can come in to our system. If you are more comfortable doing things online, some people don't like picking up a phone, then you can go to our website at caregiver.org. And this is a picture of our homepage, and there's a big orange register button there. And you click that button and you can provide us with information that you would be providing our intake person otherwise. And once you've done that, you're going to come, this is called CareNav. You'll come to this page where you will be fed a list of resources that were based on information that you gave to the questions that you answered. You'll be assigned a family consultant, and then you'll have a way of interacting with your family consultant. It doesn't matter which way you come in, if you prefer phone or if you prefer doing it online, they both come to the same place where I then get the information and then I reach out, or whatever family consultant is assigned to you reaches out then to make that, that connection with you. So as a family consultant, it's my job to conduct a thorough assessment of the caregiver's situation. What I do is I identify challenges that you are facing or things that you're dealing with presently, but I also help you to look at the future and help you to plan for that potential future. A lot of times when I get to the person, we're digging in deep. I ask a lot of questions. Typically, my assessment takes about an hour to an hour and a half. In the past, we did home visits. More recently, of course, we've been doing either by phone or over Zoom. And it's kind of this fine mix of providing you with information, providing you with advice, doing some psychoeducational stuff, maybe walking you through something about the diagnosis that you just learned about. And sometimes it's more like a therapy session. I'm a licensed psychotherapist, so sometimes, you know, I'm providing more of the emotional support as opposed to the logistical support. It really depends on what your needs are, and I follow you and just try and figure out what it is that you need, and we work together. I can hook people into resources based on their unique situation, and then I offer additional FCA services when needed. So these are unique to Family Caregiver Alliance, the next few slides. These are specific services that we offer in-house. One of the biggest reasons that people call us is to get assistance in getting a break. As I mentioned before, I sometimes get people who just haven't had a break at all in years, and they need a break. So one of the things that we have, depending on our availability of funds, is we provide respite grants that can be used to either hire in-home care through a private provider or through a home care agency. What's nice about using a private provider is they don't have to be a professional. So you may already have somebody that comes in, maybe a couple times a week, but it's so you can work. And so that's not really a break. So we can pay for maybe that same person to come in above and beyond what you're already paying for to give you that break. Or maybe you don't have anybody coming in at all, but you have a niece or a daughter, or a grandkid who maybe could use some extra money, and you know them and you trust them and the person you're caring for likes them. we can pay them to provide you a break. You can, if you don't know anybody, we can also hire through a home care agency. And so usually those are ones that we contract with. And so I would do the calling around and find one that could staff the position, and we could get it going that way. The other way it can be used is it can help to temporarily place the person you're caring for in a facility. So usually that's when somebody says to me, I really don't want to miss my grandson's graduation, but it's, I have to fly there and I'm going to be gone for 4 days. Can you help? And I can't leave my wife at home. And so, we can pay for, usually our grants can't pay for the whole stay of a facility, maybe 1 to 2 weeks. Usually a facility requires, but we can pay for some of that so that you can get a break that way. Another unique thing that we offer that nobody else does that I've heard of is something called Camp for Caring. Again, because of COVID, it's on pause. But it's a weekend retreat where the person with memory loss goes. And it's wonderful. We rent out these beautiful venues. They have these gorgeous grounds, and they stay for the weekend. And there's all sorts of structured activity programs. We provide all the meals and snacks. There's staff supervision there that can help with personal care. And then there's a nurse on staff at all times. And what we've seen is, I've seen people go and they're hesitant and there might be some anxiety. And by the end, when they are getting picked up, they don't want to leave. So they have a lot of fun there. What's nice about that too is, usually when a caregiver gets a break, they have to leave the house, right? So you're hiring somebody in your house to take care of the person and you have to leave. And what this does is gives you an opportunity to just have the house to yourself for a weekend. And again, because of COVID, we've put these on pause, but we also offer caregiver retreats where the caregiver comes. It's just a one-day event where caregivers come to relax, to meet other caregivers. We offer entertainment, so we do like yoga and Tai Chi. We had this like laughter seminar, all sorts of different things. We do art. And people get to pick and choose what activities they want. We offer massages and catered meals, and then usually have one presentation that's of special interest to caregivers, like managing stress. So it's a great day. People love them, and we're really excited to get back to them when we can. So the other thing that we offer is education, and we have a variety of educational programs for caregivers. Again, we used to go out into the community and teach these classes. Right now we're doing them on Zoom. But we teach things like dementia communication, self-care, stress management, communicating with your doctor, technology tools. That talks about all the cool gadgets and things that are out there right now for caregivers. And something called Powerful Tools for Caregivers, which is a 6-week class really honing in on how to take care of yourself better. We have lots of great webinars on our website. So we get people from all over, lawyers and doctors and physical therapists and psychotherapists, talking about a variety of topics that have to do with caregiving. And we archive them. So if you can't make it live, jump onto our website and you'll see them there. And again, lots of online classes and videos. So we do have some recorded classes. If you can't make the ones that we teach live, you can go onto our website and find them. We also have a great newsletter. It just came out. It's a monthly newsletter. It just came out today. So I'm going to share a couple screens of some of the offerings we have. But you can subscribe to it. I will put the links in the chat at the end of the presentation. But one of the things that it included was a list of all of the June classes, and there was 2 pages full of June classes that we and the other Caregiver Resource Centers are providing. The nice thing about right now in this time is we all came together and we can offer things. So the LA Caregiver Resource Center can offer a class to our Bay Area caregivers and vice versa, because we're doing things online now. We never used to do that before. So that's the benefit of having more things online right now. Here's one that I'm particularly excited about. It's on June 30th. This was in our newsletter. It's a screening that we are hosting. It's a 45-minute viewing of Robin's Wish, about Robin Williams and his battle with Lewy body dementia. It's stunning if you haven't seen it. And there will be some panelists to talk about the film and talk about Lewy body dementia. Even if you don't know anybody with Lewy body dementia, I highly recommend this. And I'll put a link on how to register for that at the end of the presentation. And another thing that showed up in our newsletter today is this summer series that we've been doing these since the pandemic started, so about a year now. Let's Get Away, and they are these virtual travel sessions, and they're fun. People get a real kick out of them, and they were particularly great when nobody could travel. You know, a lot of caregivers can't. They can't get out of the house. They can't even get to the grocery store because they're too afraid to leave someone at home alone. So this is a way of just escaping for a little bit. And they're really, really fun. The other aspect of support that we offer, there are a few. I briefly mentioned them. So one is short-term counseling. We have funds for short-term counseling. It's 6 free sessions with a therapist skilled at working with caregivers. They can be really beneficial, and I have to say, I've never seen a need greater for this particular service than I have in the past year. People have been isolated. People have been having a really hard time. I mean, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, people were terrified to let anybody into their house. All of their supports fell away. So when they once might have been sending somebody to an adult day program, that closed. When they once might have had some in-home care coming in, that stopped because people were terrified of the virus and they were alone and they were doing this on their own. And so the counseling has helped quite a bit this past year. We also offer some support groups, and if those are full, we can connect you with other support groups in your area. Again, what's beautiful about Zoom, if you can access it, it's much easier to attend things now. And the other thing that we offer when we have funds is a 90-minute legal session with an elder law attorney to discuss estate planning, specifically for long-term care. Our attorneys are well-versed in Medi-Cal law, and so that is a question that I get quite a bit is, you know, how am I going to be able to afford this down the road? You know, I don't know what to do with my money. I'm afraid I'll run out. I don't know anything about Medi-Cal, and that's where this grant can step in and really give people a lot of relief, you know, to know how they might be able to manage their assets, and then down the road maybe be able to apply for Medi-Cal to help pay for long-term care. So these are the most common resources I typically discuss with a caregiver in Marin County. I mentioned a lot of these already, but respite options. There are other grants in Marin. So we obviously have respite grants, as I mentioned. The Alzheimer's Association does have grants as well. And if you need any of this information, I can send it to you. And Jewish Family Children's Services also has a respite grant. It's really nice because not every county has other sources of funds, and so it's nice that Marin County does. Talk about IHSS, in-home support services, which if you're receiving Medi-Cal, you may be able to get in-home support services. It's one of the only programs that pays for ongoing in-home care. The other one would be if you have veterans benefits, so I can help people navigate that. Adult day programs, there are 2 in Marin County, and unfortunately they've been closed because of COVID, and I'm hoping that they open soon. And then I also talk a lot about home care with people. I walk through their options, what it's like to hire through a home care agency and some home care agency referrals, how much it's going to cost, that sort of thing, or hiring privately. You know, what that looks like, pros and cons to both, and how to maybe find to hire somebody independently. I mentioned the support options already. I mentioned the education. One of the things that I assess for is legal paperwork. Do you have your legal paperwork done? Have you done your powers of attorney for health and finance? Do you have a POLST, a physician order for life-sustaining treatment for the person that you're caring for? Do you have a trust? Do you have a will? Talk about estate planning. I talk a lot with people about just what Medi-Cal is, what the requirements are to become eligible. I have a pretty good knowledge of Medi-Cal, but I know when I have to pass that along to the pros who really know the ins and outs of Medi-Cal law. Same with IHSS and VA eligibility. I have a good working knowledge of it, but I can also pass you along to somebody who can really get in deep with you if that's what you need. And then I talk a lot about long-term care options for people. Do you want to keep them at home? What does that look like? How much will that cost? Can you do it? What's the cost to your health if you do that? What does placement look like? How much does that cost? So there are lots of different things that we're looking at, even if you're not ready for those things right this minute, things that you may be thinking about down the road. So I can drop some links into the chat. The things that I will put into the chat are our June online learning program, which includes classes from all of the 11 Caregiver Resource Centers. I'll put in a link to sign up for our newsletter, the link to register for the Robin Williams event, and then for the virtual travel event as well. But I just wanted to open it up and see if there were any questions as well.
Hi, if no one's asking any questions, I have a question, but Lori, looks like you have a question. You want to ask a question? I have a question.
Go ahead, Susan.
So Amanda, thank you. Amanda's helped me in the past. I would say first time I met you must have been, was over 10 years ago. How's that? And total accolades for Amanda and the Family Caregiver Alliance, but I want to just mention an observation and would love to maybe get your thoughts, and that is the family caregivers. That's a topic that's not talked about that much. I've noticed county governments seem to know families and don't seem to think, I mean, sometimes legally are talking about families in not such a great way. I would say thinking families are out to do bad things to their elderly members, like stealing money or other kinds of things. But there's no discussion really or acknowledgement of families and caregivers. And I guess I'm just a little surprised, or maybe I wonder why, or it just seems like it's hidden away. And maybe some thoughts about maybe it's just that the counties just aren't really noticing. It just sort of creeps up that we're all getting older. Maybe the older population seems to be really becoming more and more a significant percentage of the population in areas. And I don't know. Anyway, I'm going to stop talking, but I was wondering if, I'd love to hear some of your thoughts about that.
You're coming at this from a caregiver's perspective, Susan, and hello, it's nice to see you. I come at it from a different perspective as a professional. So I feel like we're talking about it all the time. But I can see from your viewpoint, you're right. I think, for lack of a better phrase, it's not as sexy as, kids and, having, like youth programs and things like that. Like, people don't typically in our culture like talking about aging. We're, we tend to be an ageist society. And so it's not something that people want to think about or talk about. So, I do see behind the scenes counties, county members talking about it, agencies talking about it. I think part of the issue is we don't get a ton of funding. And so there's only so many, avenues we can take to get the word out. That's why things like this are really important, just to be able to let people know that this, this is important. As I showed you the statistics, there are a lot of caregivers out there, and growing. I was talking earlier, the new administration, it doesn't matter who you voted for, in my opinion, but they are giving some highlight to caregivers and caregiver needs. And so we'll see what happens with that. I don't know, but I'm hopeful that we'll see more of a light shined on caregivers. Does that help? Is that kind of what you're looking for?
Well, a follow-up, just something follow-up is just when I was blown away when I did attend one of the support groups, one of the meetings, and I learned so much. I was so blown away about how much the involvement and what all the different families were doing.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't believe it. And it just seems so hidden away. It's something that's just not acknowledged or noticed, maybe. Like if I go to Trader Joe's, I notice family or sons or daughters or whoever helping an elderly person shop, and you could tell they're like their son or daughter, but it's not something that's noticed that much. And so it's just great hearing you talk about it. It's really important. It's really hard, and it's really important. Thank you so much.
All of those things, Susan. It's really hard. It's really important. There does seem to be a stigma. I think people are afraid. I've watched friends drop off, right? Like you become a caregiver and all of a sudden you look around and nobody's there. Your friends are gone. It's like they're afraid of like kind of catching it, catching either the disease. I think a lot of people have a hard time facing their own mortality. And so it's just something that you're right, does not get talked about. I also think people don't always, as I mentioned earlier, don't connect with actually being a caregiver. So it's hard to even get to those people. They say, no, this is just my mom. This is what I do, but, I agree with everything you're saying. And I wish it was acknowledged. And I feel like, in other cultures, they revere their elders, and here it's not so much.
We often talk about life having a lot of intersections. Mm-hmm. And in essence, what is happening is when we have people in our lives that are ill, extreme intersections are happening, and especially if it's with an aging parent or relative. Mm-hmm. And these aren't things that we normally talk about. illnesses aren't something we normally talk about. That takes a lot of sharing that I don't think people normally do.
You know, it's interesting that you say that. I just had a conversation with a caregiver yesterday who was kind of feeling like Susan, like, why am I not acknowledged? And I think, you know, in our culture, when somebody asks you how you are, we say fine. We say, oh, you know, I'm fine, as opposed to really telling somebody how you're doing, because nobody wants to hear that, right? And so we have this perception that people are okay, but we don't see what's happening behind closed doors. People are not okay. People are struggling. People also, I have to train people how to ask for help. It's a really hard thing to do. And especially if you're one of those people who just does, you know, and that's typically a lot of caregivers are the people who just do things, right? Those are the ones that have the hardest time actually reaching out and asking for help. So they're not going to tell you that they need help. There's some shame around that.
I think Emily has a question.
Yeah.
Hi, Amanda. Thank you so much for this presentation. I wasn't familiar with your agency, but it's actually really relevant to me personally. I work at the State Department of Insurance, primarily on long-term care insurance issues, private long-term care insurance issues. But we are also heading a statewide task force this year looking at exploring a public long-term care option.
Wow.
And of course, one of the big issues will be family caregivers. Most people want to age in their house, or they don't have the money for facilities. They don't want to spend down to go on Medi-Cal. So there are a number of issues around, you know, training for family caregivers, payment, that sort of thing. But it's just great to know about your organization and the resources it offers. I was completely unaware of it, and I've been working in this area a while. So thank you for sharing all that.
You are most welcome, and I'm so glad. You know, it's, again, like I said, it's, you know, it's a small nonprofit. You don't always have the ability to just like shout out like who you are, and you know, I'm really thrilled that you didn't know about us and now you do, and you can tell others. And
I will.
yeah, we're here to help. You know, that's our main goal. Yeah. That's exciting about the public option. That if that can happen, that would be really exciting.
Well, Washington made it happen. I mean, it's in the early stages, but
Yep.
if Washington can do it, I think California can do something.
Yeah, absolutely.
By the way, so my mother does live in assisted living, but I'm an only child. I'm there a lot. But the reason I'm bringing this up is that she's not at a home. In other words, she never owned a home, and she lives in an assisted living. And what I can mention is a lot of family members struggle to support their loved one in a facility. And they go, at least in this one where my mother lives, and they go and they do things for their parent to try to keep the costs down, the care costs down. And there are a lot of family members who so they may not be, the person may not be living at home, but the family is really involved. And I could tell you about myself as an only child. My mother's not a wealthy person, and I've spent huge amounts of my time also in that category. So I just wanted to point that out, that it's not so cut and dry. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And I should have mentioned in my presentation, we serve caregivers whether they're caring for somebody at home or in a facility, because caregiving does not end if somebody is in a facility. Absolutely, Susan. I mean, I have seen, like you, I know you go quite a bit. I've seen, you know, a wife who places her husband and then she goes and stays with him 12 hours a day, every single day, you know. And so you're absolutely right. It does not stop once somebody's in a facility, and sometimes it gets even more complicated. So yeah, we're here to support you.
So Amanda, I'm really interested in your your information, your education. It looked like some of the education might be about the different areas of impairment. Like I have a parent who is in assisted living in memory care, but it's in another state. And I would be interested in learning about, you know, what the progression is going to be and how best to communicate, that sort of thing. Are those resources on your website so I could?
Yeah. So I can email you a link to, we have a really nice fact sheet specifically about what you're talking about, communicating with somebody with dementia. We also, we just redid our website. So like I can't tell you like the sections to go to, but I can email you some links.
Okay.
We definitely have a class that actually yours truly recorded, so it'll be my voice doing that. And then yeah, we do have in-person, well, on Zoom right now, classes as well that do teach dementia communication, and like you said, the progression of the disease, understanding the different types of dementia, how they're different, how they're similar, that sort of thing. Yep.
Great. Thank you so much.
Sure. I need to stop sharing my screen in order to share the links in the chat, I just realized. So whenever we're ready, I can stop sharing my screen.
May I point out something, Lori? If you go to, because I just was talking to a family member out of state about this very thing, if you go to Connecting Caregivers on their website and go to Services by State, you can pull up Minnesota.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. That used to be right on our homepage, and now it's not, so I have to look around.
Hey, it's a friendly page, though. You know something? You guys just have a lot of information.
Yeah, that's why we redid the website. There was just so much, and it was like the homepage just had too much on it. So, but yes, you can. There is a clearinghouse for every state that we've put together of resources in every state.
Well, don't laugh, but I've been texting somebody in Portland and somebody in New Jersey while we've been talking about this. So, you know, there's clearly an application all over the country for this website.
Definitely. Yes. Yeah. And a lot of the statistics that I pulled from the AARP and the National Alliance for Caregivers, who we house, who is us basically, we put together a report. So if you look it up, I put the name on one of the slides. Caregiving in the US 2020, I think it's called. And you can see all sorts of statistics about caregivers right now. It's shocking. The numbers are high. As I mentioned, things keep increasing, and we know with the boomer population aging, things are going to, there's just a massive increase in the amount of care that's needed, and people are just living longer too.
So do you need me to click to stop sharing?
Nope.
Oh,
I can do it. Yep, I can do it.
Okay.
Yeah, so that'll just do that for everybody, and then I'll just need to find my links. I'll get those. And if there are other questions, I can.
What's your caseload like here in Marin?
It's a really hard question because, so I've been working for the agency for over 10 years, and I'm a consultant for, well, as Susan can attest, I'm your consultant for as long as you need. So I never close a case unless somebody asks me to, or somebody's passed away, then I'll close the case. So it kind of just like adds on and adds on. But typically the way we work is somebody will call, and we have lots of interaction at the beginning, and then they kind of drop off for a while, and then something might happen, and then they call me, and then we talk, and we might have a few back and forths again, and then I don't hear from them for a couple of years. I might call in, check in. And, you know, that's kind of how it typically works. So it's hard for me to say like how many I have. There's a lot. We have a lot of Marin clients. But on an average day, it's really hard to say. I also serve Alameda and Contra Costa counties as well. So I'm busy. Sorry, I'm just trying to get the chat up here. Okay, that's one. Any other questions?
Amanda, I have to believe that a year from now we could have you back and there will be changes if we're lucky in the government, and we could probably learn a lot more from you in just a year.
Yes, I hope so. And I hope we're doing things in person too.
That would be wonderful to actually have you come and hopefully meet with a group in our community at a friendlier time. It's something good about being out.
Yeah, and I know Susan's come to my in-person classes, so I like having the in-person. It's nice.
We appreciate the human touch.
Oh, sorry. How many people work in your organization? Rough.
We have roughly 30.
Okay.
Maybe a little less, 25.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's, I think, 7 family consultants. So we have some just dedicated to San Francisco. You know, we're dedicated to different counties. We had to split Alameda and Contra Costa counties because they're so big. So there's a couple of us on those counties, and then I do Marin. Yeah.
If I may say something else. At the very beginning, in my case, I felt so lost. I'm used to doing research, trying to find resources, and Amanda was so helpful to me. A long time, this must have been about 11 years ago, maybe even 12, maybe 11 years ago. And I would suspect that that other families feel the same way. It's a funny thing. You never quite know. You never know what it's going to be like until you're in that position. And there are decisions to make. Do I want to do this or not? But in my case, there wasn't any decision. I just needed to do this. In my mother's case, I needed to protect my mother. And I think it was just me doing it. And I think maybe one of the more difficult aspects was that that I think other people weren't really believing or understanding why I would want to protect, be there for my mother, almost in a suspicious way, like maybe I have ulterior motives for wanting to protect my mother. I mean, my father was a Holocaust survivor, so when it comes to seeing my mother be so vulnerable, I mean, it would make sense. But again, if you've never experienced something like that, maybe from the outside, it just seems strange or suspicious or something. So I don't know what to say other than it added enormous amount of stress on me, huge amount of stress to have people kind of think of me as I don't know, I thought people would be positive that I was undertaking this, wanting to help my mother through something terrible. Anyway, I'm going to stop talking, but it was just, Amanda was just great. Really, it was a lifesaver to be able to talk to somebody and to have somebody intelligent to talk to on this topic. Anyway, I'm going to stop talking, but thank you so much.
It looks like my links were only going directly to Lori, and I'm not able to put things in the chat to everyone. I'm sorry. So I will email everything to Lori, and then she can send it out if that works, Lori.
Yeah, I don't know why it's doing that because I clicked on everyone publicly, but it doesn't seem to be letting you do it. So I can send it out to everyone.
Now it just did. It just did.
Okay.
Before it didn't. Okay, so let me do that.
Thank you all for tonight. We're very grateful to have had you, and we look forward to hosting you again in the future.
Thank you so much.
Yes, this was there was so much to we learned a lot from your presentation. I really appreciate it.
Great
Good.
organization. Great organization.
Are we done? I
We
mean,
are, and I wish you all a good evening, and we'll be announcing next month's guest shortly.